and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, Michael Sidgwick, and Andy Murray here from WhatCulture to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael and Andy to discuss Seth Rollins finally being a heel again. First of all, what did you make of the turn on Monday Night Raw?
I thought it was absolutely magnificent. To use a British idiom, they played an absolute blinder to be less niche and impenetrable. It was just a total masterstroke because he's overnight, they've restored his career. He has become the most believable pro wrestler on the entire planet because his new gimmick is that of a completely aloof dickhead who is absolutely, to quote Kevin Owens himself, completely insufferable. It just feels like, just a total masterstroke. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, it was really good. I love the way it totally subverted my expectations early on in the segment as well, because like Adam Wilborn and I have discussed, and yourself, several times behind the camera and on the camera today, we thought going into it that it was going to be a rah-rah speech and that they were going to portray him as this babyface, rousing the boys, popping the boys, getting everyone G'd up. And then they turned it around very, very quickly. Seth became increasingly delusional and self-important and whiny throughout this thing as people started peeling off. And I also like the fact that they used a rah-rah speech after the Dave Meltzer erroneous report the other week as well. Very subtle little dig at Al Daver there, but good stuff all around.
And I think it worked as more than a dig because the very report of the rah-rah speech was just so plausible. Yeah. It felt absolutely like something Seth Rollins would do. It's something he's been kind of doing, like, to the press throughout the year. Yeah. So this was perfectly in character, and it informed his new character. It was just absolutely superb stuff. Perfect. I can't believe I'm using this word in conjunction with WWE, but it was a perfect heel turn.
And it wasn't just that opening promo where he said, "You all suck," basically, including to the Viking Raiders, who won at Survivor Series, I hasten to add. It was, of course, at the end of the night where he faced Kevin Owens one-on-one. We had AOP coming down, interrupting the match, getting disqualified, obviously getting Seth a DQ loss as a result of attacking Kevin Owens. But post their attack on Kevin Owens, he hit consecutive curb stomps on him. So my sort of subsequent question to this heel turn, which a lot of people have been speculating on social media, is, are we getting the Shield 2.0 with Seth Rollins and Akam Rezar as part of the AOP?
I don't think they'll go near the Shield mythology or anything like that just to confuse the presentation with Roman Reigns, who these seem to be finally pushing as a big-time babyface once again. But I can definitely see a faction. Like, they foreshadowed it, so clearly it's going to happen unless Vince just completely rewrites the script. And I think it'll work for Seth Rollins, definitely. If he looks like he's being programmed with Kevin Owens for the foreseeable future, I touched on this in the Raw review, Kevin Owens has had a brief alliance with the Street Profits of late. That could be some really good, like, shared universe storytelling that could create any number of matchups across the Raw brand for the remainder of the year. I generally think, like, the formation of that potential stable and the feud with Kevin Owens and the heel turn itself, it's like they just created so much credible, believable narrative ground laid out on the road to WrestleMania. I just can scarcely believe this company did it. It wasn't just, like, the one thing that needed to be done. They've actually addressed the present massive, huge flaw with Seth Rollins, and on the same night of television, created a new avenue and optimism for the future.
Absolutely. And Andy, you said yourself on the news this morning that AOP are sort of like an upgraded version of J&J Security.
Yeah, instead of going for the Goober Stooges who can just throw in front of wrestlers and then run away, he's gone for the two big beefy heavies who can theoretically wreck anyone. I think it's a really good approach. I think having this sniveling little heel Seth Rollins doing his stupid laugh behind two guys who could block out the sun is a very good little direction for his character, and I think that'll be the dynamic more than a Shield 2.0. In fact, I would suggest that maybe WWE even took the flak jackets and the military fatigues off AOP on last night's Raw specifically to distance themselves from, like, Shield comparisons.
Now, Michael Sidgwick mentioned a potential future feud with Kevin Owens. Is that the way you see it going?
Yeah, it's the easy one. Kevin Owens is the kind of ultimate fan favorite on that brand at the moment. He's the guy everyone wants to root for, even though he's not always presented in the biggest spotlight. Maybe not quite as hot as he was at the start of last year's Shane McMahon feud before it rumbled on a little bit. But yeah, Owens, it's such an easy, lazy answer, but it's Kevin Owens. I don't really think there's much else for him to like immediately dive into. And if you move away from the Owens storyline, you're leaving an itch unscratched. I know that's something that WWE do quite a lot, but I think it's the clear direction they're heading in.
It's going to be interesting because, as you mentioned, Kevin Owens is a very, very popular babyface, as is exemplified by his appearance at War Games, of course. But it would suggest that Rollins has to win this initial feud to establish himself as a true heel with backup like he has.
Yes, absolutely. But again, this is another reason why this is genuinely quite ingenious on their part. This is something I'm not a huge fan of personally, but clearly the inclusion and addition of AOP can sort of protect Kevin Owens in defeat just through their interference. It's a worn trope and something that really distances me from WWE as a viewer because it naturally leads to just a lack of like conclusiveness to everything. I'm always left with the question of, oh, well, who's the better man, realistically? Yeah. Why have I been watching this for so many years to such little effect? But because there's such a huge sort of outpouring of thank Christ about this Seth Rollins heel turn, surely on this specific example, it might actually have the desired reaction of people will hate Seth Rollins all the more for hiding behind these heavies. And that's ultimately the point of all this. Yeah. WWE's completely warped it in recent years just to prolong rivalries and to create this atmosphere that nothing means anything. But realistically, if he's got these two guys like just completely obscuring any kind of idea that he's a good wrestler, he's just taking the easy way out, maybe they'll get that elusive, effective heel heat.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. Like we've said there's been many instances over recent years, the names that obviously spring up are the likes of John Cena and Roman Reigns, where fans are begging for a heel turn and it never truly materializes. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's fair to say that, following the likes of Hell in a Cell, the majority of fans had rejected Seth Rollins as the face of the company, the biggest babyface, et cetera, and just, for numerous reasons. To counter that, now he has turned heel. Do you think a lot more people will be more accepting and then he will get that sort of a reaction that they really want to get from him?
I don't necessarily think so because that's been the formula for WWE for a while, right? We can't get this guy over as a babyface. Okay, we'll turn him heel and then the reactions will turn around. Daniel Bryan, good example. But with Seth, I think the guy is inherently unlikable, in almost all aspects of his performance, apart from the in-ring. His promo style when he's a babyface is just the most cringeworthy crap. It's I'm going to bring you down and all that. I'd always do that mocking voice, but that's what he sounds like. He's awful at Twitter. He's unprofessional in the extreme with his little digs at various people who don't even work for the same company and so forth. I don't think it'll turn around that way. I think we will see a future where he can be an effective babyface again, but I think that character will always have a limited shelf life with this guy.
Yeah, do you see him ever being able to transition back into being a successful babyface?
No, because I didn't think he was a particularly successful babyface even before this annus horribilis that he's endured. I've touched on this before, but way back in 2017, ahead of his big match with Triple H, which was so logical, it made so much sense. It benefited inadvertently from a really protracted build that was exacerbated by his injury. So basically you arrived at a situation where he had endured an actual real life injury. They worked it as well. He suffered a recurrence of it at the hands of Samoa Joe. He was at his lowest ebb at a point where apparently the internet was finally behind the Seth Rollins babyface turn, and he got subjected to CM Punk chants. You're right. Yeah, bit of a cameo appearance there.
Yeah, he got CM Punk chants at the biggest show of them all.
That was the biggest tell for me. That was the point where he was supposed to be the biggest babyface in the company, not named Roman Reigns. And if anything, the fact that Roman Reigns was above him in the pecking order should have really engineered this organic fan reaction where, if anything, the mere presence of Roman Reigns above him should have really convinced the fans to think, no, get behind Seth. He's so close to the pinnacle. That was never forthcoming. They kind of turned him babyface because or like they continued his babyface push because it felt like, oh well, Roman's been like, struck down under tragic circumstances. We kind of have to go with Seth, and it just never panned out. He's just a dick. And they finally realised he's a dick, and he's leaning into how much of a dick he is.
Before we get onto his Twitter shenanigans and whether or not that might actually work now, how is this going to play out with him and Becky Lynch? Because they were so keen to push the fact that these two are a couple now, but they are literally opposite ends of the scale.
Yeah, it made both of them worse, that like making that relationship an on-air thing. It made Becky significantly less cool, and it was, I think, a turning point for a lot of people with regards to Steph as well. It was just really crap stuff. I think it's quite telling that they kept Becky out of the rah-rah speech entirely. I think they want to kind of protect her aura as this really powerful babyface for them at a time when they can't really build their own via storytelling mechanisms, and they have to rely on Becky rising the way she did, kind of against the booking and so forth. So I think they're quite conscious of protecting her from all of this. I don't think she'll be involved at all. I think that the Seth Rollins relationship is something that they will only fleetingly acknowledge here and there, as they have been doing for the past few months. Don't think we'll see any on-air conflict, any kind of on-air relationship whatsoever. I think they'll just conveniently ignore it. And I do think that's the right thing to do as well.
Right, we've put it off long enough. Let's talk about Seth Rollins on Twitter. Now,
Great, it's my favourite subject.
When we talked about this previously, we basically came to the conclusion that he needed to delete his account.
Now he needs to post more.
Well, the thing is now, is this suddenly dovetailing very well into his character? Because when you talked about this before, about how this arsehole that he's become is a little bit what he's like IRL, but just turned up a little bit. And therefore, his Twitter persona, where we've seen him take shots at Will Ospreay, at journalists, at Kenny Omega, at AEW, in a roundabout sort of way.
His best mate, again, dickhead.
Yeah. Is this just going to continue, or how is it going to play out?
Right, I'm definitely summoning the Curb Your Enthusiasm music to completely undermine this point later down the line. But we've reached a position now where he's soloed, and they've finally pushed him or turned him attuned to the wavelength of fans, that even if he somehow becomes more forced on Twitter, he realizes he's a dick on Twitter and forces it to the point of, oh no, you're just leaning too far into it. Even that will intensify this heel turn. So what I'm getting at is that even if he's pretends to be worse than he is on Twitter, he will still be the worst, unable to do anything that isn't being a dick, that it can only work in his favour.
Yeah, because to bring it back to Becky Lynch, what she was saying from the start of this year, or even prior to that, what she was saying on Twitter was, by the letter of the law, a heel way of talking or a heel way of dealing with, whether opponents were babyface or heel, everyone got it. Everyone got both barrels. And yet she was obviously cheered as a babyface. But like you say, that was the sort of smart marks, understanding that this was actually quite a clever ribbing of, and peeling back of the curtain to just the right amount. But you sense that if he took a shot at Kevin Owens on Twitter, it would go badly for him, but that would make sense within his character nowadays.
It would, but I think that with Seth, I love this heel turn, right? Don't get me wrong. I thought the whole thing was very well executed, and I'm a lot more positive about him going forward as a heel than I was as him as a babyface. But with regards to Twitter, I have never seen anything that suggests this man has the imagination or the creativity to effectively bring that heel character, the scripted heel character from WWE TV, over to Twitter. I just don't think he's a very imaginative guy, and that any heat he gets on Twitter is just a result of him being a dope rather than like any carefully planned strategy to rile up this group of people. I just don't think he's very bright. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing with regards to this character, resentment, I think, like real life resentment to the point where people don't want to see the guy on TV, it could be a problem if he leans into it too much. I think I'd love to be proven wrong, however.
Before we get to his future opponents, because it's intriguing to see where you see him going forward in terms of Royal Rumble, WrestleMania. Of course, they're just around the corner following Survivor Series. One of the big things that we've all had a problem with in terms of heels, take Baron Corbin or King Corbin as a perfect example right now, is the fact that he is, objectively quite a good heel in terms of his in-ring work and generally in terms of his persona. But with all the little big dog, little dog, yappy dog, mascot dog thing that's going on. It's been dreadful. That's not going to get the right sort of heel stuff. With Seth, considering his standing within the company, and I know he's drunk the Kool-Aid, I know he's towed the party line, I know he's never taken his ball and gone home, but will he hopefully take a bit of agency in this and say, look, this isn't right for my character to say that this place smells or that this opponent is ugly or whatever, and instead try and make this a well-rounded heel character?
I don't think so. Because if someone with as much kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Gumption, I guess, as Jon Moxley can't push that through, I don't think subservient company man Seth Rollins, I don't think he has that in him. I think he's quite happy to go there to work really hard. I'll never take that away from him. He does work extremely hard for what he does, but I think he's very happy to go along and take whatever's given to him, push the company line, put this over as the best wrestling in the world because they're dead nice to me, they pay me a nice wage, and they book me on top.
This is the precise reason why he turned himself heel in the first place. A complete lack of doing anything of the sort. He said, I think it was with Sports Illustrated, the interview in which he expressed his contempt for Jon Moxley's shoot interviews. He said something to the effect of, I'm happy with the creative process because I make a point to be happy with it. And he alluded to the fact that, unlike the broad take consensus, he reckons it's a collaboration. And if it is, he's as bad as WWE creative, if you can believe it, because I will always remember, for whatever reasons, it's seared into my memory. I've got memories of my children that I wish I could remember every day with them instead of this specific thing that Seth Rollins did. And it's the Godzilla-looking bastard line where he's doing that big, horrible, stupid face. And it's like, if you've collaborated on that, you're rubbish.
Yeah, what have you watered that down from?
Stink.
Indeed. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to have any agency. I think that is a myth. The only person I've seen who's had clear agency on the direction of his character, other people might have, and they're terrible because a lot of the product is Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
Seth Rollins has a similar position of influence, but it's Roman Reigns never to me seemed to have his own stamp on his character, given what his sort of disposition is like outside of the ring. Really, it's only Daniel Bryan and I think Kevin Owens I've seen any indication of a real personality bleeding through, and that's probably because each man has so many bags of it. TLDR, Seth Rollins, if he does have agency, he probably shouldn't use it.
Let's optimistically look forward, going forward from, so I was usually mentioned potentially a feud with Kevin Owens. How do you see the future playing out for him, whether that be in the next year, whether that be WrestleMania next year, or even the Royal Rumble at the start of next year?
They don't have any plans for this, in my opinion. I think it's a kind of a last-minute 11th hour, we've been kind of forced to do this plot development, because realistically, if they had plans, when they've noticed over the spring and summer, he's not reconnecting as a top guy. In fact, he's actually repelling audiences away from Raw. Surely they're not that stupid, if this was in the works in the summer, to have done the thing they did at Hell in a Cell. Like, surely they're not that stupid. I don't think anyone's capable of that level of stupidity. On that basis, I think they've got the idea to pair him with Kevin Owens, because in the absence of Brock Lesnar, they need TV ratings. This isn't a company who's got the luxury to build, much less the mentality. I think they've picked, right, Seth Rollins, we need ultimately to have the top babyface to feud with him because we don't have Brock. I don't think they've planned anywhere beyond that point. If they had, I don't know, because for me, on the strength of the reactions he generated at War Games and over the summer, and even before War Games on Raw, it felt like the fans clearly just aren't willing to give up on Kevin Owens just yet. It has to be Kevin Owens versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania on the Raw side of things. So clearly they're not going to go from November to April with this Seth Rollins feud anyway. Realistically, you could just pick any babyface that can be halfway bothered to protect at this point for his short-term immediate picture. Ricochet or Aleister Black. Process of elimination.
And in terms of a potential future feud with Roman Reigns, that does seem to make sense. That maybe, let's say, we're going to try and have to include a draft in here somewhere, unless they just solve
or just do
again.
a Royal Rumble, Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels sort of thing.
Yeah.
But potentially, yeah, in the next year, could we see that with the roles the way that WWE have kind of always wanted them?
Yeah, I think that might be the best way to go forward. I think actually Rollins and Reigns towards WrestleMania set up in the Royal Rumble, as Michael's just described. I don't think there's any need to involve Seth in the title picture. I also don't think there's any need to involve Roman Reigns in the title picture on SmackDown, because as much as I love the guy and as much as his crowd reactions are now largely positive compared to what they were before, the reactions aren't as loud as they once were. There's not nearly as much enthusiasm, and he still feels to an extent like just a guy, despite several fantastic performances. Survivor Series was one of them. Graveyard Dogs, I thought he really held that match together. Roman Reigns is great.
Yeah.
But they need to heat him up properly again if he's going to be in that title picture, if it isn't going to flop, particularly against The Fiend, whose matches so far have been of wavering quality, even against a genius like Daniel Bryan. So a program with Seth ticks that box for me, running through WrestleMania, big exhibition. It's not an exhibition, it's the opposite of that. Years of history, the Shield, all this stuff coming together in one nice little bow. Roman wins, goes over this devious little piss, and then finally he should be over enough to go back after the belt.
This is WWE we're talking about here. If you look at the wild, oscillating history of Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, if they run with this in 2020, by April, guaranteed, Seth will be getting the babyface reactions and Roman Reigns will be getting the heel reactions.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be exciting to see where we go from here. Just thank God they pulled the trigger on a Seth Rollins heel turn at least. Right, let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there. Follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
M. Sidgwick.
You can follow Andy Murray at
Andy H. Murray. The H stands for howitzer, because that's what that postman should have used to get those packages in the room.
There's literally a sign on the door saying, don't come in.
Yeah. You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all, as I said, at WhatCultureWWE. My thanks to Michael, to Andy, and to the postman. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.